Good evening, future movers and shakers of the world. I see you, and today the future looks brighter than it has for a minute. Real talk. My name is Ridhi, and I hope by the end of this talk and this evening, you'll walk away feeling a little bit more understood and reassured, because I'm not gonna lie to you, the path that you're on is hard. I know it, but it can be infinitely fulfilling. I've been trying to find my way around STEM for almost 2 decades now. That almost sounds like a guilty admission, but it's not. Arriving at engineering and science was a circuitous path for me. When I think about it, it was necessary in the formation of my very character. My first loves were actually poetry and literature. As I started my freshman year at Georgia Tech and my parents dropped me off, I almost felt like we exchanged a wink and a nod. Engineering would be a hobby while I tried to figure out how to make money writing haikus. As it turns out, I actually fell in love with engineering from telos to techne. On top of which, I could convince no one to pay for my haikus except my sister's boyfriends, under much duress, something we still argue about it on holidays. But words, whether in poems or song format or prose, taught me the importance of narrative, empathy, perspective, and daring do. I know that's not a word that we use anymore, but I'm bringing it back. And I use these primary lessons to really help motivate me and drive me in STEM. And today, I want to walk you through how these feelings and these experiences have shaped my endeavors with NextGen Jane. At the age of 33, I asked my doctor and myself a question that I think many women at that age ask. How much longer can I punt on having kids? Because I wanted them. But I wanted this too, an opportunity to be part of something big, some big discovery, to push science forward, to burn so bright that I left an after image in people's memories. And in the back of your mind, I know that folks in this room are ambitious and can relate to that sentiment. It's such a strong feeling and has the power to keep you up late, pursuing the mysterious, the unanswered, and the unanswerable. And I know that in the back of your mind, there's this vague notion that people do their best work in their 30s, and there's some data to actually back that up. Let me bend your ear on that for a minute and engage your empathy. This dilemma forces women, in particular, into a complete existential crisis. And it's not lean in versus check out, it's lean into your family or lean into your work, and that's a hard choice. And historically, as a female, it's been an either or, not both. With the benefit of changing social mores, shared household responsibility, progressive ideas about who the primary caretaker is in a family, and vocal advocates facilitating the re-entry of mothers into the workforce, let me tell you, it is still difficult. At my own crossroads, in order to make an informed decision, I wanted to find out how many eggs I had left. And there's actually a test for that would help me make a decision about leaning in or leaning out. But it's administered at the discretion of doctors, and my doctor wouldn't prescribe it to me. She didn't think it would answer any question that was important, because it wasn't a disease, and it wasn't a diagnostic that was gonna demystify something. And in her clinical framework of utility, the test would not elucidate a different path for me. She kept coming back to the same hook, but you don't have a real problem that we're solving. I'll save you my rant on our reactive healthcare system that isn't designed for our evolving social dynamics or women. You can probably find that on the internet. We have more interesting things to discuss today. But I want you to know that this irritation with an arbitrary paradigm where a gatekeeper could tell me what I needed to know about my fertility or not did not sit well with me. And it progressed from a tingling in my prefrontal cortex to a sense of something was wrong to full-on action. NextGen Jane was formed in part to help women track their waning fertility without excessive intermediation in the privacy of their homes on a regular basis to do with it what they wish to do with it. An important part of the story, but not as important for tonight, is the series of challenges and epiphanies which led to using the form factor of a tampon. It's really interesting reading, so I suggest you Google NextGen Jane and find out more about that. But I want to actually tell you what happened next in the journey. As we dug into the topic, my co-founder Stephen and I began to map out everything that could happen to a woman that she needed to watch out for to make sure she could have kids when she was ready to have them. And it's so much more complex than aging out of fertility due to natural senescence. A woman could get a sexually transmitted infection like chlamydia, which is asymptomatic in 80% of women, you can thank me later for that piece of knowledge, and have it ascend her reproductive tract, and if it's untreated, it actually leads to infertility in women. Or she could develop a disease called endometriosis, and for those of you who don't know, it's where your endometrium, which lines your uterus, escapes and starts attaching itself and finding its way into other parts of your bodies and grows. And it's extremely painful and inconvenient. And it takes, in the United States, 10 years to diagnose this disease. That's unbelievable. It also leads to infertility. And if she does conceive and she's a little bit older, there's a chance that she's higher risk for something called preterm labor, where she could actually lose the baby or the child could have developmental issues. And I'm only sharing a portion of all the things that can affect a woman's fertility. In the end, when we mapped out the chart, it ranged from communicable diseases to heritable diseases to environmental factors that could affect her. And it led me to comment to Stephen, my co-founder, in exasperation, how can I manage this when everything is an insult to my ovaries? You might think that there is a natural way to address all of this. Have children at the quote-unquote right time, before you have this overexposure to environmental toxins, before non-communicable diseases have a chance to progress to a more morbid state, before your communicable diseases can get so bad that they do damage, or even before you just lose your natural ability to have kids. Isn't that a reasonable response? Some people think so. This is a real ad from the government of Singapore. They've taken to sending these PSAs around that are supposed to encourage women, and by chastising them for their lifestyle and remind them to not get carried away and forfeit their opportunity to repopulate society. I suggest you Google this later as well. Some of them are entertaining, damaging, depressing. Now exercise your empathy for me again, and imagine you're this woman who's being told that she can do everything a man can do. She's beginning to see examples of it too, in the boardroom, in newspapers, on television, and God willing, in the Oval Office. And I felt pretty positive about my chances It's good to see we're all on the same page. I felt pretty positive about my chances when I was growing up, even though I was raised at that transitional period where Barbies were still promoting limited career options, and I swear all the rest of my toys were pink too, I'm not sure why. And we were still working this out as a society. A lot has changed in the last 30 years, but I still notice this deafening silence when it comes to how women should negotiate their career ambitions with their ambitions for a family. And this cognitive dissonance frightens me. Lean in, but have kids. Get tenure, but raise those kids. Grind hard and do big things. Don't forget about those kids. If we provide positive messaging about leveling the playing field without actually knocking down obstacles and developing ways to manage insurmountable, fundamental biological barriers for women, we are doing more to ameliorate our own conscience than actually make the world better for her. And you might think this is an issue for a limited number of women. I'd like you to consider the following. In the United States, the average age of having your first child across all categories of women has increased. The number of women who have their first child after 35 has increased considerably in the last decade alone. These are all good things. Women are powerful contributors to economic growth. We need to facilitate this. But these choices have difficult trade-offs. For example, women are less likely to get tenure when they have young children. That's a fact. At NextGen Jane, we want to begin to provide women with the tools to tackle these issues head on and reconcile her cognitive dissonance. If technology pushes her into a post-Tinder world where she's in this dating apocalypse, we're gonna arm her with a tampon that can tell her if she's picked up chlamydia immediately so she can treat it. And if some confluence of genetics and epigenetics actually makes her get endometriosis, we're gonna track her on a monthly basis so she knows early diagnosis will lead to an early prognosis, a better prognosis. And if she wants to have children and gets pregnant, we wanna help her understand if she's at risk for preterm labor and alert her to its onset. And finally, if she wants to delay childbirth, but she still wants to have kids, we wanna help her track her egg count so she can make that decision whenever she's ready to. We love that we're arriving in a world where society encourages women to swing for the fences and waits for her incredible potential to be actualized in a million different ways. And we're here today to make sure that she has the tools to destroy the path in front of her with very few reservations. Some of you have asked me how you can be a part of this movement, and I love hearing that. Come talk to me afterward and we can brainstorm ways to work together. But for something that can scale, help me bring this conversation out in the open. Investors often ask me if there's a market for a product like this, and I'm shocked. They don't get it. Why would we want to protect our fertility? And I can't help but think that that's because there's so much locker room banter that's acceptable in the media. But women's deep concerns and issues are considered taboo for polite society. Let's change that together. Broadcast your voice with me. This is my tweet that I tweeted out today. Let them know that you need Jane in your life so we can arm ourselves with this information next time we go to an investor meeting. I want to close with a comment about why I'm so excited for what the future holds for all of us and all of you in particular. I'm a first-generation immigrant. This is a picture of my grandmother and I on the day that I left for the United States. I saw her only once more before she passed. I grew up in a lower socioeconomic community in Atlanta, Georgia. And as I made my way through engineering, business, and science as a female, I often felt alone. While being a minority sometimes gives you that feeling of being alone and othered, it also gives you a richness and strength that I would not exchange for anything. It's given me a diversity of perspective, empathy with experiences outside of the norm, and facility with cognitive dissonance that has been critical to my success. We all come from communities where we've had a moment of feeling unheard or observed something unjust, and we've had to dig deep inside of us for the courage to do something unfamiliar and hard. And because of that, you're all optimized for the challenges that lie ahead for the world. You already have the ability to observe failings in the system. You have the grit to persevere against the forces that are going to try to prohibit change against the status quo, because that's going to happen. And you have the empathy to feel moved and do something about it. Now go grab a good book for some good old-fashioned daring do and destroy that path in front of you. Thank you.